Hi, this is Emily. Today I want to share a story that might sound simple, but holds a deep truth. It's about courage, patience, and the small steps that lead us toward big dreams. Sometimes we wait for the perfect moment to start something new, but the truth is, it never comes. We think we need to be ready, confident, or perfect. We don't. We just need to take one step. This story isn't only about a boy leaving his home to chase a dream. It's about all of us, about the fear of starting, about the comfort that keeps us still, and about how one single step can change everything. So, as you listen, think of your own journey. Where are you standing still? What dream have you put on hold? Let's walk together today, because sometimes the first step forward is the most powerful thing we'll ever do. Part 1. The weight of standing still. There was once a boy who lived at the edge of a quiet village. Every evening he walked to the same spot at the end of the road. From there, he could see a long winding path disappearing into the horizon. Beyond that path, people said, was a city where dreams came true, a place filled with light, music, and endless opportunity. He had heard those stories all his life. Each time his heart beat faster, like it wanted to run ahead of him. But his feet stayed still. He told himself he would go tomorrow. Tomorrow sounded safe. It made him feel brave without taking a risk. But tomorrow never came. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into years. And still, he stood at the same spot, watching others walk away. Some of them came back with stories and confidence. Others never returned at all. He wondered what they had seen, what they had become. And deep inside, something began to stir, a quiet ache. It wasn't just curiosity. It was the feeling of being left behind. He knew every rock and tree in his village. He knew every face, every word, every routine. It was safe, but it was also small. And every night that safety felt heavier, like a weight on his chest. He would look out his window and feel something pull at him. It was not fear anymore. It was longing. A voice whispered inside, "You're not where you're meant to be." But each time he thought of leaving, fear came back stronger. What if the journey was too long? What if he failed? What if he reached the city and found he didn't belong there? Those questions wrapped around him like a warm blanket. They kept him comfortable. They also kept him trapped. So he waited. Until one evening, something happened. The sun was setting, painting the fields gold. The boy stood at the same familiar place, lost in thought. Then he heard footsteps behind him, light and fast. He turned and saw another boy, much younger, carrying a small bundle. Without hesitation, the younger boy walked past him and onto the path. He didn't pause. He didn't look back. He just walked, steady and sure, toward the horizon. The older boy watched in silence, his heart pounding. That moment broke something open inside him. Time was moving. Life was moving. And he was still standing still. He realized that every day he waited, the world moved further ahead. The people who dared to walk were changing. And he, the one who waited, was staying the same. He stood there until the younger boy disappeared around the bend. The world grew quiet again. But this time, the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. He looked back at his village, familiar and safe. Then he looked at the road, unknown and wide. Two worlds stood before him, comfort and growth. And though he didn't take a step yet, something inside him shifted. For the first time, standing still no longer felt safe. It felt like losing time. It felt like watching life from the sidelines. That night, he couldn't sleep. His heart repeated the same question again and again. What am I still waiting for? And that was how his journey began. Not with a step, but with a question. Part 2. The first step is the hardest. The next morning arrived quietly, but inside the boy, everything felt loud. He had barely slept. The question that had haunted him all night was still there. What am I waiting for? As the sun rose, he realized something simple yet powerful. Waiting would never make him ready. The only way to begin was to begin. So, before he could change his mind, he decided, today, I will take my first step. He moved slowly through the small house. In the corner, he found an old cloth bag and began to fill it. A piece of bread, a small flask of water, a thin blanket. Not much, but enough for someone who carried hope more than things. When the bag was ready, he stood at the doorway for a long time. Outside, the village was waking up. Roosters crowing, doors opening, voices rising. No one noticed him standing there, and he was glad. He didn't want to explain. This journey had to belong to him alone. He looked around one last time. Every wall, every tree, every sound held a piece of his life. He felt gratitude and fear. Then he took a deep breath and stepped outside. The air was cool and clean. The path stretched out in front of him, just as it always had. But this time, it felt different, because now it was beneath his feet. The first few steps felt light, almost easy. Each step whispered a promise that change had begun. He smiled, imagining the city, the lights, the life waiting beyond the hills. But dreams, as beautiful as they are, can fade quickly under the weight of reality. Before long, his sandals began to rub against his feet. The road turned rocky, the sun climbed higher, and the excitement began to fade. His shoulders ached under the bag. His legs, untrained for long walks, grew heavy. Sweat dripped down his face. The bread in his bag suddenly felt like a stone. Doubt began to speak again, softly at first. "You can still go back," it said. "The village is close. No one will judge you." He thought of his bed, the shade by the well, the safety of routine. For a moment he almost listened, but then he looked ahead and remembered the younger boy, the one who didn't look back. He kept walking. He tried to distract himself by counting steps. 50 steps, then rest. But even 50 felt far. He slowed down, his breathing rough, his willpower thin. The road stretched endlessly before him. No shade, no comfort, only dust and sun. He wondered if he had made a mistake. Maybe he wasn't meant for this. Maybe dreams were for other people. Still, something inside him refused to quit. He didn't know what it was: pride, stubbornness, or hope. But it kept him moving. He whispered to himself, "Just one more step." So he took one, then another, and another. As the sun began to set, his body felt heavy as stone. He saw a tree by the road and collapsed under its shade. His back hurt, his legs trembled, his mouth was dry. He drank the last drops of warm water and chewed on dry bread. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep going. He looked at the road ahead, long, quiet, disappearing into the dusk. He had walked only a short distance from home, but it felt like a lifetime. Still, he had done something that yesterday seemed impossible. He had started. That night, under the tree, the stars blinked above him. His body ached, but his heart was full. He thought about tomorrow, not with fear, but with curiosity. He didn't know what would come next, but he had already learned his first lesson. The hardest step is always the first. After that, it's just one step, and then another, and another. Part 3. Voices of Doubt. The night was quiet, except for the soft hum of crickets in the grass. The boy sat under a tree, the blanket around his shoulders, staring at the stars. His body was tired, but his mind refused to rest. Every sound in the darkness felt louder. the wind, the leaves, his own thoughts. He had taken his first step, but now the question was, could he keep going? Then he heard something. Slow footsteps coming down the road. 3 figures appeared in the dim light, moving wearily, carrying dusty bags. Their faces were tired, their clothes worn. They looked like travelers who had seen too much. When they reached the tree, the oldest man smiled faintly and asked, "May we rest here for a while?" The boy nodded and moved aside. They sat together in the flicker of a small lantern. For a while no one spoke. Only the crackle of fire filled the silence. Finally, one of the travelers sighed. "We walked this road for weeks," he said, his voice heavy. "We thought the city would change our lives. It didn't." The boy listened quietly. The man continued, "It's not what people say it is. It takes everything from you and gives nothing back." Another man, younger, but equally weary, nodded. "Better to go home while you can," he said. "There's no shame in it." Their words settled in the boy's heart like cold rain. He thought of the stories he'd heard about the city, full of light, hope, and possibility. But now, hearing them, that vision began to fade. Maybe the city wasn't meant for him either. Maybe the dream was just a story people told to keep going. He thought of home, the smell of his mother's cooking, the sound of familiar voices, the comfort of knowing tomorrow. He could almost see himself back there, safe, clean, and rested. Wouldn't that be easier? Wouldn't that make more sense? The travelers spoke softly, sharing more of their stories: hunger, rejection, exhaustion. They had reached the city's gates only to find cold eyes and closed doors. They said no one cared, no one helped, no one even noticed them. "It's better to stop now," one whispered, "before the road breaks you." The boy looked at their faces, the wrinkles of fatigue, the sadness in their eyes. He realized they weren't lying. They were speaking their truth. But still, a small voice inside him resisted. What if their truth wasn't his? What if the road had simply asked for more from them than they could give? What if, for him, it could be different? He didn't argue, though. He just listened, nodding gently as they spoke. But in his heart, he felt 2 forces pulling in opposite directions: comfort and courage. Comfort whispered, "Go home." Courage whispered, "Keep going." When the night grew colder, the travelers fell asleep beside the fire. The boy stayed awake, watching the flames dance. He thought of all the reasons to turn back, and all the reasons not to. He realized something important. The road doesn't only test your body, it tests your belief. And sometimes, the hardest battles happen inside your mind. As dawn began to lighten the horizon, the travelers rose and packed their bags. They wished him luck and started walking back toward the village. The boy stood still, watching them grow smaller and smaller in the mist. His heart ached as he thought about following them. For a moment, he even took a step in their direction. But then he stopped. He turned back toward the road ahead, long, silent, uncertain. He felt afraid, but not as afraid as before, because now he understood something new. Doubt will always speak. It will sound reasonable. It will sound kind. But if you listen too long, it will keep you from ever moving forward. So he lifted his bag onto his shoulder, took a breath, and began to walk again. Each step felt heavier than before, but also more meaningful. He wasn't walking just toward the city anymore. He was walking through his own fear. And that, he thought, might be the most important journey of all. Part 4. The Kind Stranger. The second day began gray and cold. Clouds hung low, and the wind carried a quiet chill. The boy's legs ached from the long walk, and his shoes were thin and worn. Each step reminded him how far he still had to go. The road stretched endlessly ahead, and doubt whispered again. He wondered if he had made a mistake by leaving home. His stomach growled. He had saved a small piece of bread, but it was dry and hard to chew. The hunger slowed his thoughts, and every step felt heavier. He could almost hear his mind telling him to turn back, to find comfort again. But something inside him said, just keep walking. Then, at a bend in the road, he saw someone sitting by the roadside. An older man, gray-haired and gentle-faced, mending a pair of shoes. Beside him lay a small box of tools and a cloth bag. The man looked up, smiled warmly, and said, "Come, sit for a moment. You look tired." His voice was calm, the kind of calm that comes from someone who has seen many journeys. The boy hesitated, but then stepped closer. The man opened a small bundle and pulled out 2 pieces of bread. Without asking, he handed one to the boy. "Eat," he said simply. The bread was plain but soft, and it tasted better than any meal the boy could remember. They ate quietly for a while, the sound of the wind filling the space between them. When the man spoke again, his words came slowly, with weight and kindness. "I once walked this road too," he said, looking toward the horizon. "I fell more times than I can count. There were days I wanted to quit." The boy looked at him with curiosity. "How did you keep going?" he asked softly. The man's eyes sparkled. "I stopped thinking about the city," he said. "It was too far, too big, too heavy. I just thought about the next step, one at a time. That's how you walk a long road." The boy listened, and something inside him began to shift. He had been staring too far ahead, worrying about things that hadn't happened yet. But maybe, he thought, it's not about reaching the city today. Maybe it's just about taking the next step well. They talked a little longer. The man shared stories of storms, of kindness, of people who gave him hope. He spoke of nights under the stars and days when the sun burned his skin. But he smiled as he spoke, as if every hardship had become a lesson. He said, "The road doesn't ask for speed. It asks for patience. The city will wait for you. Just keep walking." The boy felt lighter listening to him, not because the road became easier, but because he understood it better. The journey wasn't meant to be easy. It was meant to change him. When it was time to leave, the boy stood up and bowed his head in gratitude. The man smiled and said, "Remember, the road teaches in silence." The boy thanked him and began walking again. This time he didn't stare at the faraway horizon. He looked down, focusing on the rhythm of his steps. Left, right, left, right. Each footfall became a promise to keep moving. The city was still far, but it no longer felt unreachable. He realized something profound, that progress is made in moments, not miles, that courage isn't about running fast, but about not stopping. He felt calm now, almost peaceful. As he walked, the wind brushed against his face, and the sound of the road felt softer. He thought of the man's words. The road doesn't ask for speed, and he smiled. Maybe that was the secret all along, that life, like the road, rewards those who walk with patience, not perfection. And that sometimes the kindest gift we receive on our journey isn't food or rest, but a reminder that one small step is always enough. Part 5. Storms on the Road. The morning began with soft light and a cool breeze. The boy felt calm, steady, and hopeful. But the road, like life, always finds ways to test our strength. By midday, the sky had changed. Dark clouds gathered quietly, heavy and full. The warm air turned cold, and the wind began to push. At first, it was only a drizzle. He pulled his bag close and kept walking, but soon the drizzle turned into rain, and the rain became a storm. Thunder rumbled above, and the wind screamed through the trees. Water soaked his clothes and filled his shoes. The path turned to mud, sucking at his feet with every step. He could barely see the road ahead. He thought about stopping, but there was nowhere to go. The storm surrounded him, pressing from all sides. His legs trembled, his hands shook, and his breath came out in short gasps. He shouted, though no one could hear him, "Why does it have to be this hard?" The rain answered only with more cold and more noise. His thoughts grew dark. Maybe this was the sign to turn back. Maybe the city wasn't worth it. He imagined himself returning to the village, warm, safe, dry. The idea felt comforting, almost sweet. But then he remembered the man by the road. "Don't think of the city," the man had said. "Just the next step." The boy took a breath. He looked down, not forward. He lifted one foot and moved it through the mud, then the other, and again. Each step became a small victory against the storm. Step, breathe, push, step, breathe, push. The rhythm gave him focus when everything else felt chaotic. He stopped thinking about how far he had to go. He stopped thinking about the pain, the cold, the fear. All that mattered was the next step. The rain beat harder. Wind tore at his blanket, his bag, his will. But he didn't stop. He was soaked, freezing, and shaking, but moving. Every step was proof that he could endure. Every step whispered, "You are still alive." Hours passed, though he couldn't tell how many. The storm blurred time into one long moment. He was no longer the boy who had left the village. He was someone else now, someone the road was shaping. And maybe that was the point of the storm, not to stop him, but to reveal him. Just when his strength began to fade, he saw a shadow in the distance. A small hut stood by the road, leaning to one side. He pushed through the mud, every movement heavy and slow. When he finally reached it, he stumbled inside. The roof leaked a little, but it was shelter. For the first time all day, he sat down. There was a pile of sticks in the corner, left by someone long ago. He pulled out his small lighter, shielding it from the wind. After a few tries, a tiny flame appeared. Soon a small fire glowed before him. The warmth touched his frozen fingers, and he closed his eyes in relief. The storm still raged outside, but inside, there was peace. He listened to the rain pounding on the roof and felt something change within him. He had made it through the worst part, not because he was strong, but because he refused to stop. He looked into the fire and thought about the lesson hidden in the rain. Sometimes, life floods us with challenges we can't avoid. We can't outrun them. We can only walk through them, one step at a time. And in doing so, we discover who we really are. Outside, the storm slowly began to fade. The wind softened. The rain turned gentle. He smiled, watching the flame dance. Tomorrow, the road would call again, and he would be ready. Because now, he understood, strength isn't built in calm days. It's built in storms. Part 6. The Temptation to Stop. After the storm, the days grew calm again. The sky was clear, and the road glowed under the morning sun. The boy's clothes were dry now, and his steps were lighter, but his body still carried the ache of the long journey. He had walked for many days, slept under trees, and eaten little. He was tired, not just in his legs, but in his heart. One afternoon, he reached a small village between two soft hills. It was quiet, peaceful, and full of laughter. Children ran in the fields, and the smell of bread floated through the air. People waved at him as he passed, their faces kind and welcoming. A woman offered him a bowl of warm soup. The taste filled him with warmth he hadn't felt in weeks. Someone else handed him fresh bread, soft and sweet. It felt like comfort, like home. That night, they gave him a bed in a small wooden house. The blanket was warm, the pillow soft, and the air gentle. For the first time in a long while, he slept deeply. When he woke, the morning light painted golden patterns on the wall. For a moment, he forgot the road, the city, the dream. All he felt was peace. Later, the villagers invited him to stay. "There's always work here," they said. "You can help in the fields or the bakery." They smiled warmly. "You'll have food, a bed, and friends." The offer sounded perfect. He looked around. Everything he needed was here. It wasn't the city of dreams, but it was safe, simple, and kind. For a while, he let himself imagine staying. He could live a quiet life. No more hunger, no more storms, no more endless walking. Maybe this was enough. Maybe he didn't need the city after all. But that night, lying in bed, something stirred inside him. It was faint, but clear. A whisper. "This is not your dream." He sat up, listening to the silence. The village was peaceful, yes, but his heart wasn't. Comfort had wrapped around him like a soft blanket, but beneath it, he felt a small ache. He realized comfort can heal you, but it can also hold you back. It can make you forget what you once wanted. He thought about all the steps he had taken to get here. The pain, the fear, the storm. All of it had meaning. He hadn't walked this far just to stop halfway. He wanted to know what waited beyond the hills. He wanted to see the city with his own eyes, not because it was perfect, but because it was his dream. The next morning, before the sun fully rose, he packed his bag again. The bed was still warm, the air still soft, and the smell of bread lingered. He hesitated at the door, one last look at the quiet streets. He whispered, "Thank you," and stepped outside. The road waited, stretching toward the unknown. The sky turned gold as the sun climbed higher. Each breath felt fresher than the last. He walked slowly at first, then faster, feeling both gratitude and determination in every step. He knew the journey would be hard again. The hunger, the pain, the storms. But now he also knew what was worse than struggle. The quiet regret of staying where you don't belong. The village had been good to him, but the dream was calling louder. As the hills faded behind him, he smiled. He wasn't leaving comfort. He was walking toward possibility. Because sometimes, good enough can be the biggest trap of all. And sometimes choosing the harder road is the only way to grow. The road stretched on, empty but full of promise. He lifted his face to the wind and whispered, "One step at a time." And with that, he walked on, not away from peace, but toward purpose. Part 7. Small Victories. The days that followed were long but steady. The boy no longer counted the distance or the hours. He simply walked, morning to night, step by step. At first, he had measured his progress by how far he had gone. Now, he began to notice something different: how far he had grown. His legs were stronger now. The ache that once slowed him down had turned into rhythm. His breath found its pace, matching the swing of his steps. The weight of his bag no longer felt like a burden. It was part of him, a quiet reminder of how far he had come. One afternoon, he reached a small wooden bridge over a river. Weeks ago, the thought of crossing it would have filled him with fear. The boards creaked, the height dizzying. But this time he simply walked, calm, steady, confident. Halfway across, he smiled. He realized he hadn't even looked down. The fear that once ruled him had quietly disappeared. Later, he came to a steep hill. It twisted high into the clouds, sharp and demanding. Before, it would have felt impossible. But now, he climbed without stopping. His breath was deep, his steps sure. He didn't rush, he just kept moving. When he reached the top, he didn't collapse. He stood tall, looking out over the valley below, and felt a quiet pride fill his chest. All along the road, small stones marked the distance. At the beginning of his journey, those numbers had discouraged him. Each one felt like a reminder of how far he still had to go. But now, they made him smile. They weren't signs of what he lacked. They were proof of what he had achieved. He touched one of the stones gently and whispered, "Thank you." He began to notice other things too. The way the dew glistened on the grass each morning, how the wind sounded different in the valleys and in the hills, the colors of the sunset, gold, orange, soft pink. Even the silence between his footsteps felt alive. The road, once an enemy, had become his companion. It challenged him, yes, but it also taught him. He realized something important. Growth doesn't come in big leaps. It happens quietly, through small victories we barely notice. The moment you don't give up. The breath you take when you want to stop. The smile that appears when you realize how far you've come. Those moments build strength, not in your legs, but in your heart. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he stopped and turned around. The road behind him twisted out of sight, golden under the fading light. He thought about the boy who had once stood at the edge of the village, afraid to begin. That boy would never have believed he could come this far. He smiled softly, feeling both gratitude and wonder. He was no longer just walking toward a dream. He was walking within it. When the stars began to appear, he lay down beside the road. The ground felt firm beneath him, the sky endless above. He listened to the rhythm of his heartbeat, steady, strong, alive. He didn't think about the city anymore. He didn't think about how much farther he had to go. For the first time, the journey itself was enough. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Tomorrow would come with new miles, new challenges, new lessons. But tonight, he let the peace of small victories fill him. Because sometimes, it's not the final goal that changes us. It's the quiet moments in between, the steps that seem ordinary but are everything, the proof that every day we become a little stronger, a little braver, a little more ourselves. Part 8, the ending. The boy finally reached the city as the sun began to rise. The golden light touched the rooftops, the streets, the faces of strangers passing by. He stood still, taking it all in, the noise, the colors, the life. For a moment, he felt small, but also complete, because this wasn't just the end of a journey. It was the proof that he had changed. He realized the city wasn't the reward. The road was. Every struggle, every doubt, every tiny victory had shaped who he'd become. He smiled, feeling both tired and full of peace. He had learned that dreams aren't about reaching perfection. They're about walking with purpose, one step at a